The heat in the junkyard wasn't just a weather event. It was a physical weight, a suffocating blanket of humid air and the sharp, metallic tang of oxidization. It smelled like dead dreams and transmission fluid. Jax wiped a streak of grease across his forehead, leaving a dark smudge that looked like a war paint smear. He was 12, but he carried his body with the twitchy, restless energy of someone who knew they were already late for an appointment with a life they hadn't started yet. He stood in the shadow of the crusher, his eyes fixed on the rusted skeleton of an '84 Buick sedan. It was a hunk of junk to anyone else, but to Jax, it was a chariot.
The gate shift is in 5 minutes,
Caleb whispered. He was hovering near the perimeter fence, his knuckles white as he gripped the chain link. He was a year younger, built like a sapling, all knees and elbows, but his hands, even then, moved with a strange, clinical grace. He wasn't looking at the sky or the horizon like Jax. He was looking at the Buick's intake manifold.
The gate shift doesn't matter, Cal.
Jax said, his voice dropping into that tone of absolute, terrifying certainty he'd perfected.
Old Man Miller sleeps through the 6 o'clock train, every single night. If we time it to the whistle, we're invisible. It's not just the guard,
Caleb muttered, though he was already moving toward the car. He kicked a stack of old tires out of the way.
It's the steering column. It's locked, Jax. We need the bypass or we're just sitting in a coffin.
Jax didn't answer. He vaulted over the hood of a crushed Ford, landing with a soft thud in the dirt. He reached into his oversized pockets and pulled out a jagged piece of flathead screwdriver and a coil of stripped copper wire. He'd spent 3 weeks obsessing over schematics he'd pilfered from the back of Miller's shop.
I told you,
Jax said, a sharp, predatory grin splitting his face.
I figured it out.
Caleb slid into the passenger seat, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The interior of the Buick was a sensory assault. Musty upholstery, the dry scent of cracked vinyl, and the lingering ghost of old cigarette smoke. Jax shimmied into the driver's seat, his frame barely reaching the pedals. He shoved his legs forward, his boots pressing against the floorboards, and grabbed the steering wheel. It was sticky, coated in years of neglect.
You really think it'll turn?
Caleb asked, his voice barely audible over the distant drone of the cicadas.
It has to,
Jax said. He leaned down, his face a mask of focus, and jammed the screwdriver into the ignition gap. He worked the wires with a dexterity that belied his age. It wasn't the clumsy work of a boy stealing a joyride. It was the surgical precision of an engineer. He touched the stripped ends together, his tongue poking out of the corner of his mouth. A spark flew. A sharp, stinging odor of ozone filled the cramped cabin. Then, the engine didn't just start, it roared, a ragged, coughing, violent protest of 4 cylinders struggling to reconcile with the world. The entire frame of the car shuddered. The vibration rattled the loose change in the ashtray and hummed through their spines, a low-frequency pulse that felt like coming alive. Jax laughed. It was a harsh, brittle sound, devoid of innocence. He slammed the gear shift into neutral, revving the engine until the old belt squealed in agony.
See?
Jax shouted over the mechanical cacophony.
The cage has a door, Cal. We just had to build the key.
Caleb looked at the junkyard fences as they began to blur in his peripheral vision. For the first time in his life, the desolation of their hometown didn't feel like a permanent state of being. It felt like a landscape they were moving through, something they could leave in the rearview mirror if they just pressed hard enough on the gas. Jax punched the Buick into drive. The tires caught a patch of loose gravel, spinning wildly before biting into the hard-packed dirt of the exit lane. They didn't have a map, and they didn't have a destination, but as the car lurched forward, breaking through the rusted gate hinges with a scream of tortured metal, the look on Jax's face wasn't one of fear. It was one of ownership.
Don't look back,
Jax commanded, his eyes fixed on the narrow, dust-choked road that led toward the highway. Caleb didn't look back. He gripped the door handle, watching the town, the only world they had ever known, begin to shrink. He felt the raw, unadulterated power of the machine beneath them, a vessel they had stolen from the dust. In that moment, they weren't just kids from the wrong side of the tracks. They were architects of their own escape.
The sweltering heat of the afternoon seemed to break, replaced by the wind rushing through the cracked windows, cooling the sweat on their skin. Jax leaned forward, his small hands white-knuckled on the wheel, pushing the Buick past its limits, forcing the speedometer needle to climb past 60, then 70, toward a number the car was never meant to reach.
We're going!
Jax yelled, his voice cracking with a mix of triumph and something darker, something like a hunger that no amount of asphalt could ever sate.
We're finally going, Cal.
Caleb nodded, his pulse syncing with the frantic, uneven rhythm of the engine. He reached out and placed a hand on the dashboard, feeling the heat radiate through the plastic, sealing a pact that would survive the years, the distance, and the eventual, inevitable ruin of everything they had yet to build. The stolen sedan wheezed, a metallic death rattle emanating from the guts of an engine that had no business being pushed past 50. Smoke, thick and acrid as burning hair, began to curl from the seams of the hood, obscuring the orange smear of the setting sun. Jax kept his foot buried in the floorboard, his knuckles white against the cracked leather of the steering wheel. Beside him, Caleb was leaning toward the dashboard, his face illuminated by the flickering, dying amber of the speedometer light.
"Ease off, Jax!"
Caleb yelled over the roar of the intake.
"She's dumping coolant! We're gonna fry the block!"
Just a little further.
Jax hissed, his eyes locked on the horizon. The highway ahead was a ribbon of cracked asphalt bleeding into the darkness of the pines.
If we hit the county line, they can't touch us. We just need to hit the line.
There is no line! It's just more road!
Caleb reached over, his hand hovering over the gear shift, debating whether to force it into neutral. He didn't, though. He saw the look in Jax's eyes, that frantic, starving light that burned even when the car was dying. Jax slammed the car into a lower gear. The transmission groaned, a sound like grinding teeth, and the sedan bucked. Then, with a final, violent shriek of metal, the engine gave up the ghost. The tachometer needle pinned itself to the red, the car shuddered, and the power steering locked hard. Jax wrestled the wheel, fighting the momentum until the sedan skidded off the shoulder, plowing through a patch of dry weeds and coming to a bone-jarring halt in a drainage ditch. Silence followed, a heavy, ringing silence that seemed louder than the engine had been. The steam hissed, a steady, rhythmic vent of pressure that felt like the earth itself letting out a sigh. Caleb leaned back, his chest heaving. He wiped grease and sweat from his forehead, leaving a dark streak across his skin. He looked at Jax. Jax wasn't moving. He was gripping the wheel so hard his forearms were trembling.
"We made it,"
Jax whispered. It wasn't a question. Caleb looked out the window at the absolute nothingness of the woods.
"We made it 3 miles, Jax. We're still in the county. We're still in the dirt."
We're moving.
Jax snapped, turning to face him. His eyes were wide, dilated.
Look at the distance we put between us and that junkyard. It's not about the county line. It's about the fact that we're sitting in a car we took, on a road we chose.
Caleb watched him, the frustration starting to curdle into something heavier. He saw the way Jax looked at the dashboard, at the road, at everything except the mess they'd just made.
"We're going to have to walk back.
Caleb said quietly.
If we're lucky, nobody saw us take it. If we're unlucky, your old man and mine are going to be waiting at the gates with a belt."
Let them wait.
Jax said, his voice dropping into that cold, sharp tone that would one day define him.
I'm not going back to the yard, Caleb. Not to work. Not to rust. You see how fast we were going? Did you feel that? The way the world blurred?
Caleb looked down at his own hands. They were trembling too, not from fear, but from the adrenaline still coursing through his veins. He had felt it. The sensation of velocity had been like a drug, a temporary cure for the suffocating weight of their lives.
It was fast. Yeah.
It's not enough.
Jack said. He kicked the door open and climbed out into the cooling air. The smell of the night was coming on, pine needles and damp earth. He stood on the edge of the ditch, looking back toward the town that was currently invisible, hidden by the rise of the landscape. Caleb followed him out, his boots crunching on the gravel. He stood a few feet behind Jack's.
You think you can just drive away from it all? One day? Just leave this place in the rear view until it's just a speck?
Jax turned around. The moonlight caught the sharp planes of his face, making him look older than his years.
I know I can. And you're coming with me.
Caleb felt a surge of loyalty, fierce and protective, but it was anchored to the ground.
Someone has to keep the engines running, Jax. Someone has to make sure we don't end up like the rest of them. You want the speed? You need someone to build the machine that can hold it. Then build it,
Jack said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper.
Build me something that doesn't break, and I'll take us as far as the road goes. I'll be the ghost, and you'll be the one who keeps the heart beating. We won't just steal cars, Caleb. We'll own the track. We'll own the whole damn circuit.
Caleb stared at his friend. He saw the ambition there, raw and unrefined, lacking any sense of what it would cost. He saw the fire that would eventually burn down the bridge between them, though he didn't know it yet. At that moment, it just felt like a promise, a life raft in a sea of abandonment.
You promise?
Caleb asked, his voice barely audible.
You don't leave me in the dust once you get your shot?
Jax reached out and gripped Caleb's shoulder. His hand was iron hard.
We're a team, Caleb. The wrench and the ghost. We're the only ones who know what this feels like. We're going to be legends.
Caleb nodded, a slow, solemn movement. He looked at the smoking wreck in the ditch, then back at the dark road ahead. He made his vow then, silently, promising that he would never let Jax down, that he would be the foundation Jax built his life upon.
All right.
Caleb whispered.
But when you get there, when you get to the top, don't you dare forget who held the wrench.
Jax smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. It was a predatory look, one of a man already looking past his friend to the next horizon.
I won't forget,
Jax promised. They stood there for a long time, two boys in the middle of a nowhere highway, illuminated by the distant, dying light of a world they were desperate to outrun. The crickets began to hum, and the wind picked up, cooling the sweat on their skin. They didn't know that the road they were dreaming of would one day become the site of their ruin, or that the loyalty they were pledging would be the first thing Jax discarded when the stakes got high enough. They just stood in the cooling twilight, two kids who had tasted the speed and decided, right then and there, that they would never be satisfied with standing still again. The engine of the Buick popped one last time, a cooling contraction that sounded like a gunshot in the quiet, and for a second, both boys flinched, a phantom echo of the future, waiting in the dark.